정부 일을 하게 돼가지고 이 여권 일을 이영탁 원장께 맡기게 돼서 이 회의에 자주 못 나왔습니다. 저를 만나게 해서 대단히 반갑습니다. 오늘 특별한 게스트 스피커가 오시기 때문에 그분 소개해드리도록 하겠습니다. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great privilege for me to introduce very special guest speaker this morning, who is one of the greatest public servants and political strategists and political minds in the United States. He served his country and his government in various capacities. He was Chief of Staff for 2 presidents, and he was Treasury Secretary, and also he was State Secretary. I don't think there are many who has done that except Mr. James Baker III, who is with us this morning. I had great privilege of knowing him and working with him when I was Minister of Finance in the late 1980s, when he was Treasury Secretary. Although he was senior to me in every respect, but we kept warm friendship. And actually he came to Seoul a number of times, but he spoke at this the forum before. And I gathered from his latest book, titled Work Hard, Study, and Keep Out of Politics. I know he has done 2, work hard and study, but he didn't keep into politics. And actually he was quite successful. In fact, I gathered that this is the grandfather's advice given to him and his grandchildren. Work hard and study and keep out of politics. But if his grandfather was alive to see what he has done in the public service arena, I'm sure he must have forgiven him getting into political arena. As he has done so many things as State Secretary, but he has done a lot more as a Treasury Secretary. He led the G5 then to have the Plaza Accord in the 1980s. He also initiated what is called the Plaza Accord, you know, which was to realign the exchange rates between US dollar and the Japanese yen. And then he initiated what is called the Baker Plan, which again dealt with Latin American debts. And so he actually is considered one of the great architects of the international financial economic system of which exists today. He has written a series of books, but I recommend you read his book, and there's many interesting stories about U.S. politics, and all those names you are so familiar with. You will find very interesting stories, and you'll find out more about the James Baker III. This morning, I know that he will talk about next year's presidential election, for which we're all interested, and what the challenges are facing next year's president. And I'm looking forward to listening to him. With no further ado, I'd like to invite, actually, Ambassador Hyun, who was ambassador to the United States when Secretary Baker was at the State Department. Please take the podium, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for that very, very generous introduction. It's my understanding that I'm to speak for a few minutes and then come up here and we'll have some dialogue rather than just monologue, and we'll have some Q&A time. And I will do that. I want to recognize the distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps who are here, and of course the distinguished former members of the government of Korea. Let me begin by saying that I'm really pleased to be back in the Republic of Korea. I've told a number of you at prior events over the course of the past couple of days that I have a particularly warm spot in my heart for this country because the country was born at a time when I was a young lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. Many of my friends participated in the Korean War. Fortunately, most of them came back. Unfortunately, many of them didn't. But the Korean War was, in effect, the war of my generation in the United States, and I've always, therefore, had a particularly soft spot in my heart for the Republic of Korea. I want to acknowledge the Institute for Global Economics for producing not only first-rate research and stimulating debate, as well on issues important to the Republic of Korea, and particularly the former chairman, who has now gone back into government one more time, but my friend Il Sakong, and as he put it, we have not only been colleagues through the years and served together as finance ministers, but we served together as friends, and we have remained friends, and it's indeed a pleasure to be back here with you, sir. I've been asked to speak to you briefly about some of the global challenges that are going to face the next American president, and then when we get into the Q&A portion of the program, I'll be delighted to take questions on whatever subjects you want to throw them up there on, whether it's the U.S. Politics, presidential election, or something else. And hopefully we can spend most of our time in that endeavor. You know, it was Korean and American blood that were responsible for establishing this great nation, and our two countries have been extraordinarily close ever since. I said the other day that I firmly believe this. I believed it throughout my tenure as White House Chief of Staff, as Secretary of Treasury, as Secretary of State. I believe that the security relationship between the Republic of Korea and the United States of America, as well as that between America and Japan, have been responsible for maintaining peace in this part of the world for the many years that followed the Korean War. But even with such a close and mutually beneficial beginning, and even after those decades of working together as close allies, some of the tensions between the United States and Korea that exist today really, I don't think should surprise us. International relationships can be expected to experience problems from time to time. After all, friendships between nations are not that much different from personal friendships. They both have their ups and their downs. And so, unfortunately, today, the bonds between the United States and Korea have been tested in recent years, despite our mutual dependence upon one another. But I say that only to make this point, that the test of a strong relationship is not how it starts, but rather how it adapts to change and how it continues. And so the time is right, I think, for our countries to reevaluate some common goals, time for our countries to solidify our relationship, so that the next generation of Americans and Koreans are as proud of that relationship as my generation in the United States and hopefully my generation in Korea have been. And this is why, of course, President Lee and President Bush are now exchanging visits. President Lee having just been to the White House in April, and President Bush coming here in July. And that's why they were promoting a new strategic alliance as a way to fortify this 55-year-old relationship. President Lee, I think, spoke volumes when he said recently, "We shall not let ideology and politics blind us from common values and common interests and common norms." Meanwhile, the White House has also been quick, I think, to understand that a new and improved relationship requires shifts in how the United States carries out its core mission of preventing aggression from North Korea and stemming the spread of nuclear weapons from that country. The United States, I think, recognizes that it has to be sensitive to the view of Koreans, particularly as to its military presence, and the recent decision to move the main United States military base out of downtown Seoul is a very reasonable and sensible development. Another promising part of the new strategic alliance will give the Republic of Korea operational control of its wartime military forces, starting in 2012. At the same time, we have to understand and fully appreciate, I think, that not just the security ties that bind the two countries, but the economic ties that bind us and that really serve each of our countries very well. Today, the Republic of Korea, starting from a country in ruins back there 50 plus years ago, is now the world's 13th largest economy, and it is America's 7th largest trading partner. The United States, on the other hand, is the Republic of Korea's 3rd largest trading partner. And I think it is both fair and accurate to say that what is good for South Korea is also good for the United States, and vice versa. That's why a free trade agreement between the two countries is vital, and that's a subject I will discuss in a little bit more detail in just a minute. Let me say that I know President Bush understands this reality, and I'm sure will make that very clear when he visits the Republic of Korea after the Group of 8 summit in Tokyo this year. Maintaining a strong relationship with Korea is one of many challenges that's going to confront whoever is elected the new President of the United States. But of course, there are many, many others. Iraq, of course, is probably the most immediate. While the United States remains committed to the cause of a unified, democratic, and stable Iraq, and while there has been significant progress, positive progress, in the security situation on the ground recently, the conflict there continues to divide international and domestic opinion alike. And that conflict will play a role in our presidential election. Perhaps even more important is as a challenge facing the next American president is the global struggle against terrorism. South Korea has been a key ally in this effort by assisting efforts in Iraq and in Afghanistan and in Lebanon. Containing the spread of weapons of mass destruction is a similarly critical challenge, especially given the possibility that chemical or biological or nuclear weapons might fall into the hands of rogue states, or worse, even into the hands of terrorists. Climate change is a serious problem that cannot be ignored. Somehow, the world has got to establish a gradual and orderly transition to cleaner and more efficient energy sources, and has to guard against, in doing so, has to guard against hasty efforts that could prompt economic dislocations and jeopardize global stability. Another critical challenge facing the next president will be defending and extending free trade and investment. You know, we often hear about the inevitability of globalization. And there are surely extraordinary technological forces, the internet, I suppose, chief among them, driving interdependence among countries. But globalization is also very much the creature of our current system of liberalized trade and investment. This system did not just spontaneously happen or appear. It has been painstakingly built up since the end of World War II through the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs, the World Trade Organization, and a plethora of other bilateral and multilateral arrangements. But we should always recall that the so-called first golden era of globalization that ran from roughly 1870 to 1914 collapsed under the weight of the First World War and the Great Depression. If we care about globalization, therefore, we should care about the system of liberalized trade and investment that drives globalization. The economic advantages of globalization, I think, are very, very clear. By lowering barriers to trade and investment, we encourage entrepreneurship, innovation, and savings. And all of these things lead to higher standards of living. The Republic of Korea exemplifies the power of looking beyond one's own borders for economic opportunity. A country, as I say, that lay literally in ruins in 1953 is now one of the world's largest and most dynamic economies. Moreover, increasing international trade and investment has two other potential benefits. First of all, economic growth will over time help foster more open government as emerging middle classes demand a greater say politically. And secondly, economic interdependence will tend to diminish violence between states as the costs of conflict arise. But let me stress one more thing. I am not naive, I don't think, when it comes to globalization. I am not a utopian when it comes to globalization. While economic openness may lead in time to more responsive government, progress can be slow and progress can be fitful. And if World War I proves anything, it proves that economic interdependence is really no perfect guarantor of peace. Moreover, globalization can bring its own share of economic difficulties. One of these is the risk of contagion, as integrated international financial markets rapidly transmit shocks from one economy to another. We saw this, of course, during the East Asian financial crisis of 1997. On balance, though, I think the verdict is in, and I would submit to you that the verdict is in. Globalization is good. Good for producers, good for consumers, good for developed countries, and has witnessed the spectacular growth of China and others, which have opened up their economies, potentially better for less developed countries. Despite this, liberalized trade and investment remains a contentious political issue in many, many countries around the world. And the United States of America is certainly no exception. Long a traditional leader of efforts to lower economic barriers, our credibility has diminished since the United States Congress let presidential trade promotion, or what we used to call fast-track negotiating authority, expire last year. This dealt a heavy blow to President Bush's ability to negotiate a whole range of bilateral and multilateral trade agreements. Moreover, even agreements negotiated under previous fast-track authority faced significant trouble in the United States. The Democratic leadership of the House of Representatives appears determined to defeat a free trade agreement with Colombia. The folly of rejecting an agreement with Colombia, a democracy struggling to reform its economy and battle narco-terrorists, is really breathtaking. But other agreements face uncertain congressional futures as well. Sadly, this is true of the Korean-U.S. free trade agreement. The timing is admittedly hardly auspicious. With signs of a broader economic slowdown, many Americans feel uncertain of their futures. And during an election year, there is, as usual, no shortage of politicians willing to play on public fears for partisan gain. I regret to say that both of the Democratic candidates for president have talked of reopening NAFTA, even if they were merely pandering to important constituencies in states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. Their comments may haunt them if either one of them becomes president. Senator McCain, I should stress, is not among the protectionists. Yes, I'm a Republican, and yes, I endorse Senator McCain, but this is not a political speech I'm making. Senator McCain has the courage to speak up for free trade, and that is not politically popular in the United States. Today, as throughout years in public life, he is and has been a staunch supporter of free trade. But even if he wins in November, he's going to face a democratically controlled Congress in all probability, with at best a problematic position toward free trade agreements. So in short, ladies and gentlemen, supporters of liberalized trade and investment must somehow find a way to make their voices heard. The case for the Korean-U.S. free trade agreement is especially compelling because we are talking, after all, about two of the world's largest economies. Indeed, for the United States, this will be our largest free trade agreement since the North American Free Trade Agreement. Moreover, the agreement will mark a further deepening of one of the most enduring and productive bilateral relationships in the world, and one that for 55 years now has been committed to the joint pursuit of peace and prosperity. What better way is there to lay the groundwork for even closer economic and strategic cooperation in the years to come? But in an even broader sense, the Korean-U.S. Free Trade Agreement is a test of national character for the United States of America. Make no mistake about it. If the United States starts down the path of protectionism, others will follow. Support for free trade and investment is an expression of confidence in America's ability to compete in the global marketplace. And so we should not see globalization as a threat. Rather, we should see it as an opportunity for our workers. In the United States, robust export performance, for instance, is one of the few bright spots in our current cloudy economic picture. To turn inward would not just damage the United States' economic future, it would also be a historic abrogation of Washington's leadership in the international economic arena. If the United States turns protectionist, others will follow. We and the rest of the world will suffer. And that's why expanding free trade and investment must be one of the challenges or issues at the very top of the next president of the United States' agenda. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, let me mention one final challenge that will face the next American president, and that's maintaining long-term global stability. There is one issue that is vital to that stability, and that's an orderly and peaceful reunification of South and North Korea. The stakes are huge. The stakes are huge, and not just for this peninsula. Because of the risk that tensions there could escalate to the nuclear level, the 38th parallel continues to serve as a potential flashpoint for a conflict that could threaten not just the two Koreas, but Korea's neighbors in the region. A successful outcome of the six-nation talks on Pyongyang's nuclear program could set the stage for reduced tensions and sustained progress toward the ultimate goal of unification. Though the cost of unification on the Korean Peninsula may be great, the German experience, with respect to which I had some participation, I think proves that the benefits far outweigh the costs. Overwhelmingly and increasingly, Germans believed the unification of their country was not only justified, but beneficial. Unfortunately, the eventual reunification of Korea, whether it happens years from now or decades from now, will be even more costly than in the German case. Why? Well, we need look no further than income disparities, which are far greater between the two Koreas than they were for the two Germanys. By most estimates, per capita income in South Korea is 14 to 16 times that of the North. In 1991, per capita income in West Germany was only 3 times greater than in East Germany. With the Koreas, the same disparity in almost every area of social, economic, or environmental concern. And so it may be only prudent to take a long-term approach to reunification, by first helping North Korea become a more productive country. North Korea is a painful reminder and is indeed the last vestige of a Cold War that once split the world into two armed camps. So no matter how distant or difficult it may seem, the goal of a reunified Korea is a very, very worthy one indeed. Indeed, the continuing division in Korea is a tragedy. It's a tragedy for all of the Korean people, and it is a challenge for all who seek a more peaceful world. Thank you all very, very much.